Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Group Project. Today I sat down for a chat with author Victor Sweetser, a super talented writer with an amazing story. A horror short story, which he co-wrote, recently sold for 6 figures to be made into a film, according to Deadline.com. The Occupant, based on The House That Came to Birch Street, will be produced by New Line Cinema. Some big names are attached to it, such as Zach Cregger, who produced the amazing horror movie Barbarian, starring Justin Long. We talked about how all this came about and where the Birch Street story idea came from. We also got into chatting about Victor's new project, Shadowbox Archives, which seeks to create an online horror community for the sharing of stories, art, and narrations. Honestly, it was a really fun chat, and I learned a lot. I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I did.
Yeah, I had another writer say that to me once. I was like, yeah, I don't know, I find it kind of easy writing stories. And he's just like, he wrote me back a message. It's like, it is not easy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. But yeah, I feel like sometimes just stories just like write themselves.
It's like, it's almost like, I mean, it sounds kind of corny and maybe a little cliched, but it is like the writer is like, almost like you're transcribing. The story is dictating to the writer what should be written. It's like you can just kind of let the story tells you like, okay, this is what I want to happen, and then you write it down. And it's
it's like
as opposed to.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like a lot of times, I don't know if you've had this where you sit down and you try to write something, you plan it out meticulously, and it's like it's not going that way at all. It wants to go a completely different direction. And
yeah,
I
don't know if you outline stuff.
Yeah, I do. I didn't always do that. I used to be more of a pantser, but lately I've gotten more and more of a planner. And sometimes I'll jump back and forth between planning and then just being like, you know what, let's throw this plan out the door and see what happens. Because I don't know if you've had this problem where it's like you plan it meticulously and then once you get in there and you're writing it, it wants to go in a completely different direction. And then if you try to fight it, it makes it worse. For me, it seems like it's a struggle to. And then it's like, you know what? Have it your way story. You want to be written this way, fine.
Yeah, I 100% know that feeling. I've completely stopped trying to outline things because it almost makes it worse for me for some reason. Like, I'll find if I outline something, I'll get really bogged down in the details of like whatever part I'm on. All of a sudden I start like expanding it and like going into these inner dialogues of characters and all this stuff. And it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's just not the way I was meant to write.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very similar in my writing process, such as it is.
There seems to be 2 camps: the fly by the seat of your pants and the planners. And neither one of us can ever understand how the other does what they do. Yeah,
it is like that. And then I think like lately I've been like, okay, story, have it your way. You want to be written this way. It's on you if it fails. So I'm not to blame. If someone's like, hey, this story sucks. Hey, the story told me to write itself that way. And then, of course, they would think I was crazy, but
yeah,
you're like, all right, let's put you in a straitjacket then. You're having a story, write everything. You're listening.
It is weird, but it's true though. Like I find so often people will ask me like, oh, for Patreon, because I include Patreon characters in my Hollows End stories, and people ask me sometimes like, oh, can my character be doing this, or can they be, this type of character? And it's like, I wish I could say yes, but I just don't know like where the story is going. I don't know if that character is going to fit in. Like, so the loose, kind of like the looser details, the better, because then I can kind of just take the story wherever it's going to go. But yeah, I find it really hard to plan things out ahead of time.
Yeah, definitely. That reminds me of when people, I'm sure you probably had this happen where people just tell you the stories they want you to write. They'll be like, "Hey, I got this great idea. Can you write this story for me?" And then like sometimes it's like, "Okay, I can actually I've got an angle into that. I can write that." And a lot of other times it's like, "I can't write this. There's no angle I can take to get into this story." And it's to me, I don't know if you've had this experience where you try it and it's not working out because for whatever reason, that's their story. You can't find your angle into their story to write it.
Yeah, I've had that issue uh, definitely before, and
Hmm.
one time I've experienced that is with No Sleep Moderation, where I've had an
Oh
ending,
yeah,
or I've had and all credit to the mods. They do everything for free and everything like
yeah,
that. Um,
definitely.
but yeah, like I remember when I was first starting out posting on No Sleep, I had one story and like it was all finished. I had 4 parts and I was like really happy with it. Posted the ending. First 3 parts, no issue, but then the ending, the moderator said, no, this doesn't follow the guidelines because the main
Hmm.
character ended up doing some evil things that they're not supposed to do. So I ended up rewriting it 3, 4 times, and each time I'd send back a different version. They'd be like, "No, this isn't okay either. Like, this is not okay." And by the end of it, I was just like getting really frustrated. Like, I just want to write the story that I want to write. Like, I don't want to write what this. I know their intentions are good. They're trying to get me to post a story that'll actually fly on the subreddit. But I was
Yeah.
just like, this is not the story I wanted to write, and I kind of got really demoralized by that at the time.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've had the same experience, and I 100% agree with you that they're doing their job, and they're doing the best they can. They've got the rules that they need to follow, and they want us to follow. But at the same time, if someone tells you, "Hey, just do it this way," it's not always simple to just do it that way. With like, then you're breaking other stuff in the story, and you're fixing it. It's fine if it's like criticism from another writer or something like that, where it's in the service of the story. But if it's like in the service of external rules that may or may not be organic to the story,
Hmm.
then you end up breaking stuff potentially that you got to go back and fix from that one thing that you needed to add. Like I've had that where I was like, it seemed like a simple, hey, just do this so you can make it mesh with the rules. But then when I did that, it contradicted some other stuff that happened in the story. And
Yeah,
then you got to go back and make sure everything meshes.
yeah. I've had that a few times with a collaboration too, where there was all these rules to the collaboration and kind of the universe how it worked, and it ended up becoming more focused on the rules than the story.
Yeah.
And yeah, it can be a little bit frustrating sometimes to be coerced into doing a story a certain way that you don't necessarily want to do.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely. Definitely. And if you were working in a collaboration, it's a beautiful thing. But like you said, you've got to, like everybody, I think, like both parties end up making compromises to an extent, or, however many parties there are in the collaboration. And it can be very fruitful, but also frustrating to try to get it all connected and meshing well.
yeah, the no sleep moderators, I should give them a shout out for, I guess, in a way, they kind of not orchestrated, but facilitated you getting the movie deal, right?
Yeah.
For the house that came to Birch Street. I don't know if for anybody listening who doesn't know, I don't know if you want to give a quick rundown on kind of how that happened, how you end up selling a story to New Line Cinema for to be basically made into a movie, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was largely the mods doing. And they coordinated with Scott Glassgold. And of course, this was like right after We Used to Live Here had sold. And after that, there was like a window of like 3 months where Scott was reading stories to give feedback on. And at the time, I didn't know that could also potentially include a film deal, further down the line. I had no idea. Well, that was kind of in the back of my mind, but I was just hoping for a critique, really. So for like 3 months during that monthly contest, best of month, the winner got a reading from Scott Glasgold, producer, who's helped sell movies like We Used to Live Here and my wife and I bought a ranch. So I was really excited about that, just to get an opportunity for him to read my story. And when he read the story, which wasn't the story that ended up selling, it was another haunted house story, and it was a series. When he read the series, he liked it, and as luck would have it, he was working on another haunted house concept to package up and pitch to film studios with John Palaquin, this amazing writer-director who's written and directed movies like Grave Encounters 2 and Spiral. They were actually working on a haunted house concept at the same time. So Scott read my story that had won Best of Month in June. He forwarded it along to John, and then he contacted me and he said, "Hey, would you be interested in actually jumping on our project, because we happen to be working on also a haunted house concept, and you seem to know your way around haunted houses," which I didn't debate that. I was like, "Yeah, sure, I know my way around haunted houses."
I'm an expert.
At which point I did a lot of research on haunted houses.
Yeah.
But I knew a little enough to write a Nosleep series. Let's put it that way. Maybe a little bit more. I don't know. I may not give myself enough credit, but yeah, they happened to already be working on a haunted house concept, as luck would have it, and my series that won Best of Month during that short window, it was only like 3 months when Scott was doing those readings, happened to be a haunted house story. So then at that point, after he forwarded it along to John, they both liked it, and they all three of us got together and we started meeting with Google Meet, and hashing out the details for the concept that they had already started, basically, about this haunted house that moves into the neighborhood, and the hauntings kind of spill out of the haunted house. It was almost like a reverse haunted house concept. They already had that going, actually. And when I heard the concept, I was like, this is such a great concept. I want to be a part of this.
Was it just the idea? Sorry, was it just the idea of like the house moving to the street and there being something kind of inside of it, or was there more to it at that point?
Yeah, John had written it a whole treatment. I think I think they had been thinking about pitching that as a film, but then when they read my story, I think at that point they decided to bring me on to write a short story and pitch it that way.
Yeah.
To use a short story as a vehicle. But yeah, the concept was that, as John had formed and Scott had been, I think, working with him too on the concept, was a house moves into a house is, what made it really interesting was that the house was free. It was a free house that someone had gotten. The only stipulation was that you had to pay for the moving costs. So like there's this mystery surrounding why is this house free?
Right.
It's free, but it has to be moved. And that's part of the catch, is that the house had to be moved. So they had to move the house to a new location. And when the house moves into the neighborhood has its issues, but up to that point, there's nothing. There are no hauntings going on. Let's put it that way. When the house moves in, all hell breaks loose. So it's like, like with a normal haunted house, you have someone moves into the haunted house. In this case, the haunted house moves in to the neighborhood, and the hauntings kind of are haunting the entire neighborhood. And they had hatched that concept, actually inspired by a true story. There was a house advertised on Facebook as free, but you just had to move it. And there were some comments below that. Someone had said, kind of like a Nosleep post, someone had said, isn't this the house that was haunted? I had a friend who used to live here, different people had different takes on the house, but like some people said that it was supposedly haunted, like they heard about it being haunted.
Yeah.
A friend of theirs had lived there, or someone had walked by and seen something crazy going on in a window. And this was like an actual Facebook post. I'm not sure what happened. That house was in Louisiana, by the way. I'm not sure what happened to it, but with Occupant, with our story, we made it like it had to be moved. On the surface, it was for historical reasons. It was like a historical house, and they were doing something with the land, so they had to move it off the land. But really, the reason it was being moved is because something sinister is going on inside the house, and it's trying to spread its evil to other neighborhoods.
I thought it was a very, very original concept. And the execution was excellent. Like,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's got those moments where you laugh out loud, and lightens up with a little bit of comedy. And is there any aspects of that are, because I know, like, when I write a story, a lot of my real life kind of seeps in, and I was kind of wondering while I was rereading it, if any of that stuff is kind of stuff from your childhood or your teenage years that you kind of channeled, or was it just completely fiction with obviously the the original Facebook post as the kind of inspiration?
Yeah, I think it was the group, and this was going back to what I said earlier. This was really a collaborative effort between me, Scott, and John. And I think actually Scott had come up with the idea for. We may have had a lot for him at that point. I was adapting a lot for the short story from John's treatment and his outline that he created for the film version. But I can't remember whose idea was to have a lot where these teenage kids, smoked and lost their virginity and so on. But I think it was really a collaboration between the three of us. So to go back to your question, I would also wonder how much of that, was John and Scott's childhood as well going into that. But for me, I think anytime, like, unconsciously, if I have a character who's doing something, it's always going to unconsciously draw from something that happened in my experience. And growing up, there was definitely, I went to a private school, and it was very cliquish. You had rich kids, and you had not as rich kids, and you had not as rich kids. Yeah. There were a lot of cliques forming just around that, and other things too. All the other things that cliques normally form around, and like with Chloe and her friends, we had the group of people I hung around with. We definitely, in a sense, we felt like outsiders as well. I did, at least. I can't speak for them, but just in the sense, like, I was not so great at being part of those cliques myself. So I would just kind of, hey, you want to be a friend? Let's be friends. And then, unfortunately, a lot of times, if you're just simple like that and straightforward as a teenager growing up, I think you're not. It ends up where you're kind of an outsider looking into what the cool kids are doing. But going back to Chloe and her brother and her friends, I think, like, for them, they might not have this really cool clique, but they've got maybe something better in the relationships that they have that are perhaps stronger because they're more organic, or they're less. It's one great thing about being an outsider is that you can kind of bond over being an outsider. And so the shoal was their place, I think, kind of like a symbolic place for them to do that. And then when the house moves in, it's moving on to the shoal. So that's taking away that spot where they had their escape and they had their way to celebrate their own group.
It's kind of a double whammy. They lose their hangout spot, and then there's also this added, much worse horror that starts happening where the whole town starts to kind of change all around them. It almost gave me slight Needful Things vibes of that. I don't know if you ever read Needful Things, of the shopkeeper, the demon shopkeeper who comes to town, and everybody starts slowly turning against each other. It almost gave me a little bit of those vibes in a really good way, because that's like one of my favorite books ever. And obviously they're different, but I'm always comparing things and like trying to find an analogy, something analogous to whatever I'm reading. So yeah, it gave me a little bit of those vibes of just this like demon almost moving to town and affecting change all around it in really negative ways.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I haven't actually read Needful Things, but it is on the to read list.
Oh yeah,
I appreciate that comparison. It's very kind. Yeah, it's. I think it really is. It's an interesting thing when you've got something that you grew up with, and everything's going to change, but something that you grew up with is changing because of something that's coming in from the outside. It's almost like you're crossing DNA with whatever it is from the outside, and you're creating this new kind of organism. And I think like for them, that's what in Occupant, that's what their town is becoming. It's becoming a new organism that's some parts what it used to be and what they grew up with, and then also parts of this new thing that's coming in.
yeah. I think the age of the kids is like perfect for this type of story too. This kind of almost getting ready to head off to college, like things are getting to the point where there's going to be this big change and everybody's probably going to go off to college and do their own thing. And yeah, I don't know. I just love reading stories from characters and who are like either kids or teenagers. I just find there's something really captivating about that, especially when it's well done.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like anything like that is going to be inevitably, compared to stories like it, where it's like this, it's a it's like an ensemble coming of age almost. Like you've got not just like an individual coming of age, but a whole group coming of age together, which creates, I think, an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
Whether it's it or another story like that, that you can explore, that becomes like really another kind of character, kind of like the character between all of them.
Yeah.
It's almost like a way to cheat too, because you can lean into that other character, which is the group dynamic.
Yeah, you feel like you already know these characters because they remind you of like friends and the dynamics of your own kind of teenage friend group,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And everybody's got to do it. Everybody's got to be a teenager. So
yeah,
there's no skipping it unless you were in a coma the whole time. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess that's pretty much the only way. Yeah.
It's a tough time to a teenage year. Is a really tough time.
It is. Yeah. I think that trauma and that all those hard times though kind of makes us into what we are as adults. Like you talked about being a bit of a loner. Not in the cool kids group in high school, and I definitely relate to that. I was like the poster boy for a loner, especially like grade 10. I switched schools. I was in a private school too in grade 9, and then my parents moved. I ended up going to a public school, and grade 9 to grade 10, you meet a lot of friends in that time, I think, and yeah, it's a tough time to be a kid, and especially if you don't have a lot of friends. But I think that that difficulty can really, help you later in life kind of get a different perspective on things,
Yeah, definitely. And I was looking at that. I was thinking about that too as we were working on this story, which is how can being an outsider, being a loner, having your own group outside of all the cool kids, but very tight knit, like how is that a strength? How is this weakness a strength? And like you were saying about that struggle makes you stronger. That was like part of like how I think we figured out how the story needed to resolve itself. They had that as a strength. They were closer together because of that, and because of that, they were able to defeat the evil that came to their city. Whereas in other cases, maybe the cool kids wouldn't have won. Maybe they would have all died. I mean, I'm not chuckling because I just think it's interesting if you can take a weakness and turn it into a strength.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of that movie, The Faculty, how
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
all the cool kids, all the football kids are the first ones to go, right? And
Yeah,
then,
it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up because John Palaquin, the writer director who was collaborating on this project, he mentioned that frequently as like one of the many reference points that we used to figure out how to make it resonate with an audience. And faculty was one that came up a lot because it does get a lot of those things right when it comes to teenagers and cool kids and not so cool kids and how to use that to appeal to the audience.
yeah, I think even if you were if you were a cool kid in high school, you probably relate more to the loner to the loner in a lot of these stories because
Yeah.
the underdog, and we all want to root for the underdog. And I think regardless of your social position in high school, we all had moments where we feel on the outside, and yeah, so I think that's it's a good thing to tap into when you're writing a story. Like most people probably don't want to read a story from the cool kid's perspective, who nothing ever goes wrong for them, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. We need conflict and tension in the story.
And if somebody's really, top dog and everything's going great for them, I think the audience loves to see that person brought down rather than, having them succeed.
Yeah, that's another really interesting thing. I love when stories do that. Is like, so you got the cool kid, or you got the person in power, or whoever it is, who everything's going right for, but then they get brought down, and they go through a struggle, and they get humanized, and I think those are really compelling stories too.
Well, yeah, I think there's all these different arcs you can take on stories. I saw a great video, a lecture of Kurt Vonnegut talking about this once, and he was explaining how your character can start at the top and go down. Mm-hmm. They can start in the middle, go up and down. They can start at the bottom and go up. But like, you really don't want to really deviate from that too much. Like, you don't want to see somebody who's already at the top go up even higher, right?
Oh yeah.
There's certain things work for stories and certain things don't. And yeah, it reminds me. I'm looking at the Occupant article right now talking about your movie, the movie being produced. And it's Zach Cregger from Barbarian will produce the film, and I keep thinking about that movie. How the character in that, Justin Long's character, is he starts off on a high and then very quickly is brought down to like the lowest low possible. And yeah, I don't know. I really love that movie. I thought it was really cool that he's going to be involved in producing the film.
Yeah, definitely. I love Barbarian. It was amazing. And yeah, Justin Long killed it in that role as well. And with one of those cases where we're like, there's a character that's so arrogant, we're almost rooting for them to be brought down a little bit.
Yeah, totally.
But then they're humanized too at that point, and then they're more relatable at that point.
Yeah, 100%. Once they're brought down, then it's like, okay, now I kind of feel bad for this guy. I want him to be okay.
Zach Cregger did just such a masterful job with Barbarian.
Yeah, the comeuppance for Justin Long when he ends up. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but the comeuppance for him of where he ends up at the end of that movie is kind of priceless.
Yep, and that's great for horror. Comeuppances are great for horror.
Yeah, redemption and the opposite of that, I guess, where somebody's gets their just desserts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Zach Cregger was attached. Roy Lee, who had produced a lot of great stuff, like It and It Chapter 2. He's also attached to produce. Scott Glassgold is attached to produce Occupant. It was like a dream that I'm still not sure if I'm going to wake up from.
Yeah, honestly, it's like that is the dream for, I think, probably every writer who does it seriously. Like, I think every writer kind of dreams of this day where somebody from Hollywood or from a movie studio reaches out and says, "Oh yeah, I read your story. I really like it. Like, can we turn it into a movie?" Like, I think that would be the highest elation I could probably feel would be that that message, and then you probably immediately assume like, oh, this is a scam or whatever. But as soon as you verify that it's real, I think that would be the probably the best feeling in the world for a writer.
Yeah, definitely. And going back to what you said at the very beginning about the mods, this was definitely a case where Scott didn't discover me. He discovered Marcus Kluwer. I think, if I'm remembering correct. Yeah, he discovered Marcus Kluwer from browsing through Nosleep and finding stories.
Right.
But for me, he didn't discover me that way. He discovered me because the mods had set up this as part of the monthly contest with Scott.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much of that was Scott's idea to do for 3 months, to have him read the stories that won Best of Month. But the mods surely had a lot to do with that. So that also is a huge thing. Helping creators like us is when other people are looking out for us and trying to help promote us, and that made such a huge impact is a mod setting us up. That's why when people gripe about, oh, my story got removed because the mod said yada yada yada, I'm always coming from the perspective of they've done a lot of great stuff too. Even and that story removal is, that can suck, but that's part of their job. But really a big shout out to the mods of Nosleep for putting together things like the monthly contests that helped lead to a massive opportunity for someone like me.
Yeah, and like I don't think probably a lot of people don't even realize that Nosleep is a thing.
Still, yeah.
Still, it's still I think like it's a pretty niche thing, but just the idea, like when I tell people that I write for Nosleep and do what I do, yeah, most people have never heard of Nosleep and probably would have no idea that you could post something online on a site and a Hollywood producer could reach out to you and say, hey, I really like this. Like most people assume it's going to be a book that's published through some major publisher, and then they'll maybe find something through that. But yeah, was there plans for The Occupant to be released as a novel, or is it going to stay a short story?
There was talk of that at one point, and I'm not sure if that talk is over yet. What happened was, as that was kind of being planned out, the novelization of Occupant, the writer's strike happened, and that kind of sidelined that plan for a little bit, because at some point there was talk of auctioning it off for a novel. But yeah, the writer's strike was a culprit of that, which the writer's strike was important. It needed to happen, obviously.
Yeah.
For fair pay and treatment of writers. I'll take that over a novel deal any day.
How has your experience been kind of working with the Hollywood movie producer kind of side of things? Like, I know you hear stories of properties being sold, and big movie studio buys something and then sits on it for 10 years or whatever. Nothing ever gets made with it, and like I think that would be my biggest fear if I did sell something, is that all of a sudden nothing's ever going to happen with it. Do you find like the communication's pretty good? Like, do you kind of know where things are at, like with the whole project, or are you still kind of just waiting to see what happens with things?
The way I look at that, and that's a very good question. I think that I think is probably at the center of a lot of people's minds as they're hoping to get something sold to Hollywood, is what happens next.
Yeah.
It depends on what your contract is about. Like in my case, my contract was basically, I'm not involved with the production of Occupant in any capacity. If I was, that would change things. But I'm a writer who sold a story to a major film studio, which I'm incredibly thankful for. And once that sold, now it's out of my hands. I don't have any involvement with its production. So unless they were to like contact me and say, hey, we want some insight on this character as we're developing it as a film, I wouldn't have any direct involvement in it. That would obviously change.
I guess
my involvement.
That's kind of a relief, but it would also be kind of weird it would also be kind of weird for me. Like
Yeah.
you hear Stephen King say like, the books are different. The movies and the books are different. If I sell a book to be made as a movie, that's kind of their thing. Like they can do whatever they want with it. I know it's not going to be the same as the book.
Yeah.
I feel like I would struggle with that, honestly. Like if I sold like my Hollow's End series to be made into a movie or something, to have to give away control of that and say like, okay, yeah, just it's yours now.
That's a very good point. I think it's easier for me also because I'm coming out of a place of I'm one of the 3 people who collaborated on this project.
Yeah.
If it was only my baby originally, I might be more protective, but it's easier for me to sit here and say, oh yeah, it's fine. But I think it does have to do with the contract. Like, like George R. R. Martin, for example, he's very involved in the production of Game of Thrones as a series and all the spin-off series. But that's like part of his agreement with HBO is that he has more involvement. But that wasn't my part of my agreement to be involved, and I ain't complaining because they paid me a lot. So, and that's another thing. When you get paid, it's like, okay, I did a job, I got paid for it, and I would love for this to appear on the movie screen. But I also understand that only about 10% of these movies that get optioned actually end up being made.
And it could end up being very different from the original conceit. Like it could end up being a very different movie. Like I watched recently the Tales from the Void. Travis Brown, Grand Theft Auto: The Whistler.
Oh yeah.
And I just caught it a few weeks ago. I had to like subscribe to it. What's that?
Is that out now?
Yeah, it is out now.
Oh,
yeah.
I've got to watch that. Yeah, congratulations to Travis. Grand Theft Auto. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm hoping to get him on here at some point to talk about that. But yeah, I was kind of surprised. It was they did a great job with it. But I was surprised how different it was from the original.
Yeah.
And like, I kind of like, partway through, I just kind of said, okay, this is going to be different. I'm going to put the original story out of my mind and just watch this for what it is. But yeah, I feel like I would maybe struggle with that if it was my baby, like to just completely have it taken out of my hands and say, okay, you guys do what you're going to do.
Yeah. And I think it does. I also think about it like, as a creative myself, if I were in their shoes, if I was in someone else's shoes writing the screenplay or directing it, I would need to find my own angle into that story. And it might end up being that in order to find my own angle into that story, it has to be different. And that doesn't even count all the practicality stuff, like if film's a different medium, time constraints, budget constraints. So like all that in there, I get it. But I also get like if someone created this thing themselves, like it was their own baby, they didn't collaborate on it. I also get that they would be more protective of that property, potentially. I get that.
And yeah, you make a good point. It's a visual medium. Like when I was rereading the house on Birch, the house that came to Birch Street, there's so much inner dialogue and things the characters are thinking to themselves and narrating to themselves that you really wouldn't be able to put in a visual medium like a movie or a TV show. So you kind of have to find other ways to tell a story. Maybe not the original story completely, but tell a story that's compelling and that people want to watch.
Yeah, definitely. It's a tough thing, I think, trying to, and I'm sure they consider that too, as they're making a lot of times, maybe not always, but as whoever's hands the property passes into, I'm sure they're like, oh man, I really don't want to change this, but I've got no choice because of X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And it may even be, someone else who's involved in the project who's like, well, we really need this thing in there because of this, that may be external to the film and the story it's trying to tell, which is kind of, in a way, like, I guess, connected to Nosleep rules, those being external from the actual story. Like, there are certain fulfillments that a film has to meet that don't always connect to the story that it's trying to tell.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a little bit about Shadowbox Archives. because I know we've been talking a while about kind of the transition to or the house on Birch Street and the selling the property and everything. But I want to talk a little bit about Shadowbox Archives. I know it kind of stemmed. I guess we could say maybe it stemmed from Nosleep and from that community. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the conception of that and kind of how that all came about.
Yeah, definitely. I love talking about Shadowbox. It is something I'm very passionate about, and what it where it started was, as you're probably aware, but the listeners won't be aware of. It started on Discord of all places, and a bunch of us writers from Nosleep and elsewhere had our own Discord. I won't say what the name of it is because that one's a secret. It's a need to know Discord, but if you're an alumni on Nosleep, you might be contacted by us. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
If you're an alumnus, it started on Discord, and we were talking on Discord about how we love Nosleep, but Reddit doesn't really do much to actually pay authors. Other places on like Patreon, you can get paid for your work. So we were basically saying, what if we had something like Nosleep, but it was on Patreon? We built our own community, and we're a bunch of writers working together, posting stories, and we split all the payment. And talk about that, which actually, honestly, it started with, we were just like, hey, let's do a website and put our work up on a website. And it was very simple. That was it. And we were like, should it be WordPress? But then that other stuff started. We started basically asking questions like, why isn't Reddit doing more to pay us with their award system? Why is Reddit now selling posts and comments to an AI company for many millions of dollars?
Yeah.
Because even though we don't want them to, obviously, because some of that might include our stories. And it was in the user agreement, so technically they can legally get away with it. Why is that happening? What can we do about it? Also, Reddit had been the CEO of Reddit had been talking about paywalling certain subreddits, and there was no mention of using any of that to pay writers or other creators on Reddit. So yeah, a lot of that was like happening, and we're like, you know what? Let's make a community on Patreon where we actually have control over who gets paid, which is us equally, and basically try to do something like Reddit but on Patreon.
Yeah. And you mentioned the awards, and yeah, like I've heard writers.
I'm skipping a lot of stuff. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say I'm skipping a lot of stuff. There was a point before we got to Patreon. We were trying to build our own platform that was like Reddit meets Patreon. We were trying to build our own platform, but we hit so many snags with that, trying to outsource it to a web development company that we were just like, I was frustrated with that whole process. It's hard to find someone you can. What do you say?
You actually hired a web developer, correct?
I did, and I spent $20,000.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Wow.
Yeah. But that's how passionate I am about it.
Wow.
And that happened. That was like that was after Reddit sold our sold posts and comments to an AI company for training. That was kind of like a thing for me where I was like, you know what? If I've got a way to do something about this, which I'd just been paid a lot of money from something that sold on Nosleep, so I was in a spot where I was like, you know what? I made a lot of money thanks to Nosleep. Let me see if I can do something to help out a little bit. Not to say that I'm anything. I'm just a spoke in the wheel. I'm just a part of this. But yeah, there was a point where we were trying to create our own platform that was like Patreon meets Nosleep meets Reddit. But I think actually this way, what happened was the idea we've shoehorned it into Patreon. And the advantage to that is, instead of it being just a platform where you've got all these different communities that are basically like subreddits, the advantage now is we can just focus on one community that's more like Nosleep within Patreon. So I think it turned out all right, and I'll probably get that 20K back from that company and figure out how to reinvest it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like, I feel like I should say thank you for paying it forward and like
Well,
kind of reinvesting in the community.
don't thank me until we get something from it. So, and even then, I'm just, I was just super lucky I'm trying to pay it forward any way I can. I was just super lucky to have gotten that deal. Thanks to Nosleep, thanks to the moderators, thanks to the audience, thanks to other writers like yourself who are putting out amazing content, and that we're always trying to together like create better and better stuff. And it could have been any one of us too. These things that sell to the movie studios, it can be any one of us, like yourself, who are amazing writers and creating stuff that's film worthy. And I just happen to be in the right place at the right time with Scott and John happen to be working on a haunted house story. My story that won happened to be a haunted house story. So like a lot of things, there was a lot of just happen to be's. So with that in mind, I looked at, is there anything I can do to help what's going on with Reddit not being so nice to its content creators?
Yeah, and yeah, full credit to you for doing that. I think it's an amazing idea, and I hope it just continues to grow and people continue to join. Like right now, we got 200 members total.
Yeah, which if you're tuning in and you're on Reddit, you might be like 200. Come on, my favorite Reddit authors have 10,000 followers in their subreddits. Fair point, yeah. But Patreon is a lot harder to get followers on than Reddit is.
Yeah, so Reddit's already got the whole platform set up. People are already coming on Reddit, going on Nosleep, so it's easy to get seen on there. It's a lot harder to get people to come over to a whole new platform. So hopefully people will continue filtering over there. And you mentioned awards on Reddit. And I like that we have the awards on Shadowbox Archives, where you actually giving something to the author themselves. It kind of reminds me of like Reddit used to have gold and silver and platinum, and they would have these ones even higher than that. There was Argentium, and there was Turnian or something like that. And I remember one of the writers I chat with back when that was still in place, they got an Argentium or whatever it was at the time. And I think it cost $20, they figured out, for the person who read their story to buy that award and give it to them. And they saw none of it.
Exactly.
And I just remember the guy saying, I wish they just sent me $20.
Yeah. Or just like, hey, you send me like part of that, But Patreon is...
We're ungrateful for the award. I mean, it's a very humbling thing. It's a very amazing thing to get an award like that, because the person spent the money on it. But at the same time, it's like, why is Reddit getting this money? Shouldn't I be getting this money? But yeah, I like that. It's kind of opening it up a little bit more so that it's not just Reddit getting all the money from these awards and from from that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things we've been saying, and I've been saying a lot, is even if this fails, even if Shadowbox fails, at the least, maybe someone can look at what we're trying to do and do something better and help out creators like writers and artists who are struggling perpetually. This isn't just a problem that's been recent, but all the AI that's being used now to create content is not helping any. And it's even harder nowadays probably to get paid. There are other ways to get paid for your work, but I think there's also, unfortunately, a stigma against paying creatives. And I think, if you look at Reddit and how effective it's been at getting people to open their wallets for these awards, and you compare it to how hard it is for people on Patreon to get people paying to their tiers, even when they're releasing all this cool content, it's fascinating and also unfortunate to me that there's that stigma against paying creatives, and that it's cooler to pay a big company like Reddit, here, take all my money, Reddit, than it is to let me go to this person's Patreon, and if I've got the extra money and they've got something that they're offering me that's as cool as those perks that you have on Reddit Plus, let me check that out. And I realize like a lot of people don't have the extra. They're not able to do that, and that's perfectly fine. We're on Shadowbox. Our most important thing for us right now is a free member. We're trying to build our free audience, and everything on Shadowbox is either free or becomes free. We're using what Reddit is doing right, which is a lot of free content. Anything that's paid is like just an additional perk. We're using that as kind of like a model to try to get more people interested in the community. And if we can create a community that's like Nosleep or like creepypasta.com,
Yeah.
And you've got stories that could potentially become viral, I think that could be a big thing. And then you're also actually you're paying everyone equally, so it's fair. And Patreon is very fair. I think they only do it's like I think 6 to 12% is what they take from the profits. That's fair. That's a lot fairer than Reddit.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. And that's even, like I think YouTube, don't they take most of the profit on YouTube? Doesn't YouTube take?
Honestly, I've been really impressed with YouTube for paying creators, and I've heard the same thing in other places too. Is that like in terms of paying creators, they're the best platform by far. Like
that's great.
TikTok, Instagram, whoever else, like they do pay creators, but the amount of money you're getting per view is by far the highest on YouTube. I've heard some people complaining like if they get a super chat, which is basically like a tip, like somebody gives you $10, that YouTube takes a high percentage of that. I haven't actually looked into that too much, but in terms of paying for like views, I do find YouTube to be like very fair, and I like it because it helps me kind of pay it forward too a little bit, because I found when I was writing exclusively before I started the YouTube, it was getting harder and harder to find places to sell stories to. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I don't know, for whatever reason, it's just getting tougher and tougher to find a podcast or a narrator. I don't know, maybe it's just like there's a lot more people writing right now. But yeah, the word got out that Nosleep is a good way to sell your stories.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully the word gets out of it. That Shadowbox is a good place to sell your stories.
Yeah.
We'll work on that, try to get, because, we're not trying to build a community necessarily as popular as Nosleep, but if you could create a community that's approaching the popularity of a Nosleep within Patreon, and the writers are getting paid for it, and the moderators too, which is another problem Reddit had. They weren't paying their moderators. Even though they're advertising in all these communities and making a ton of money. If you got a community like that could potentially have viral stories or viral art within Patreon, that could be a game changer. And like I said, even if we fail at that, maybe someone else sees what we're trying to do and they do it better, and that's okay too.
Yeah, and I hope Nosleep stays alive for a long time. I hope that this doesn't replace Nosleep.
Yeah.
Because it's its own thing, and it's a huge part of the community, and I think everybody would be very sad if Nosleep ever disappeared.
I agree. Yeah, and I think I always, anytime I try to mention it now, is that I have nothing but love for Nosleep. I mean, if in case it wasn't clear, all they helped me out with my film deal. Nothing but love for Nosleep. Nothing but love for Odd Directions. Nothing but love for Whisper Alley Echoes. All the great communities there where writers can post their work and be seen by anyone, including producers. Nothing but love for those communities. But Reddit is an issue. Or Reddit has issues. Let's put it that way. And when I say these things, it's just out of love for Nosleep and how unfortunate it is that Nosleep mods should be making money, for example.
Yeah, I think it came from a place of need, of where all of us had stories that either didn't work on Nosleep, or maybe we wanted to do something different with them. We're tired of querying them to different magazines or whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to have a place where there's not really any very strict guidelines. It's just kind of, if you have a horror story, you can post it here,
Oh yeah, definitely.
I think it's very liberating for writers to have a place like that.
Yeah, for sure. for sure. Yep. And another great thing we've got there are the narrations, and those are thanks to narrators like yourself. You're also an amazing writer too. I'm blown away by how someone like yourself can do both. You can create excellent stories and also do excellent narrations. We've been thankful to have you as one of our narrators there on Shadowbox.
Yeah, I try to fit in both. Sometimes it's hard. the writing kind of takes a backseat to the narrating some days because the narrating is kind of paying the bills right now. But yeah, I have a new Hollow's End that I just finished writing, and I'm kind of like maybe a third of the way through reading it right now. So excited for that.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's one thing I really love about your stories is like the wackiness. I remember, I think I read one of your stories about a clown that was juggling chainsaws.
Yeah.
That was one of the first stories I read by you, and you pulled it off. And I was like, this is such an insane concept. How did they pull it off? And then not long after that, I think you had messaged me about something. It was something nice you had to say, or you were helping me out on something related to writing and posting. And I was just like, wow, this guy, Jordan Group, is just a stand-up guy. He's not only is an amazing writer, he's a very nice person, very helpful towards other writers in the community. And yeah, I was just blown away at that early on from our exchanges online and then reading your work and seeing what you do with all these wacky concepts, and somehow they stick their landing.
Thanks. I try to explore that gray area between insanity and sanity, I guess.
That's great.
I don't know. I like to keep the story, funny in the moments when there's a little reprieve, and then try to make things scary too. But it's a balancing act for sure. Like juggling 3 chainsaws.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's terrible.
No, that's great. That's so on point with comedy and horror. Like always, sometimes they're fighting against each other, but I'm always amazed when writers like yourself can synthesize them. Like with Hollow's End, how well you do with that is synthesizing, making the comedy actually work in service of the horror, and vice versa.
Thanks. Yeah, somebody gave me their novel to read once to kind of not proofread, but just kind of give my thoughts on it before it got published, and that was one thing that I mentioned to them, and they did make changes. Was like, if you're gonna make scary parts, make them scary. Don't try to put the humor there. Like, try to put the humor in the parts where you're getting a reprieve from the scariness, because he was kind of throwing in these funny jokes, like trying to be funny during a really tense, scary scene. And it's like, this doesn't really work so well when you're trying to be funny when you want the reader to be scared, So yeah, it's definitely it's a tricky thing to accomplish, but it's my favorite. My favorite genre to dabble in is kind of the horror comedy, which I think would you say that's kind of your wheelhouse too? Is like adding a little bit of humor.
Yeah, sometimes. Going back to what you said about not trying to, which I don't know if I'm always good at, but not trying to insert it artificially, just like with other storytelling elements. Like if a lot of times, like if we try to insert something in there that shouldn't be, that's artificial and like is not in service of the story, it can backfire. Same thing with humor. So like some stories, I've noticed that some stories that I write are just completely without humor. There's not an ounce of humor in it. And then others, there's a fair amount of humor in there, and it's a little bit zany and maybe over the top even.
Yeah.
But I think if it all works well in those stories, I think it would be, like you said, because it was supposed to be there and it was like organic, as opposed to trying to insert something into the story that shouldn't be there. I think that's another one of those things that it's not something you can learn in a class too necessarily. I mean, it's good like if you've got someone like yourself who's reading the draft and they can point that out, but it seems to me it's one of those things that is almost also instinctive. And even like someone reading a draft like that would instinctively be able to tell, okay, this doesn't work here. the humor just doesn't belong here. There isn't like a specific reason why it doesn't belong there. It's not like plotting it out, like having the story where you can plot out every aspect and what needs to go in each place. Seems to me humor, going back to what you said about it being tricky, like a lot of it is one of those instinctive things that if you're good at it like yourself, you can kind of look at it and say, okay, that doesn't belong there.
Yeah. I think writing something funny, it's so much more rare than reading something sad or writing something sad. Like, there's a lot of very, very well written sad pastas out there, or whatever you call them, where it's a sad, scary story, and like they're amazing. But yeah, it's a lot more rare to find something where you actually like laugh out loud at the same within the same story as you're hanging out to the edge of your seat, sweating because you're scared for the character. It's like, I don't know. I think it's one of those rare things in writing, and when I find an author who does it well, like Jason Parkin, he does it really well. There are certain authors, Jack Townsend, who does the Gas Station Jack series.
Oh yeah.
And like you find those authors and you just kind of cling to them because it's like they're so rare to find an author like that, and that's my favorite kind of thing to read. So I think that
Grady Hendrix does a good job too, right? There's another Grady Hendrix.
I don't think I've read anything by him.
Yeah, I mentioned the name. I completely forgot the novel I was thinking of. There's one sitting on my shelf right now that.
Oh, I have read him. I read Horror Store.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How to Sell a Haunted House. The one I've got is My Best Friend's Exorcism. That's a book of his that I've got. But
I got to read more stuff from him because I loved Horror Store. It was such a good book.
Yeah, actually, that was. I wanted to ask you, have you heard of Grady Hendrix? Because it seemed like it would be an author that you would be into.
Yeah, I got to read more of his stuff. Have you read Horror Store?
I have not.
It's like a very short novel, but it takes place in like an IKEA, basically.
Oh, right.
And it's very good. I don't want to give anything away, but it's the whole layout and design of the book itself is like an IKEA brochure almost. And yeah, it's just really, really creative, and it jumps right in. Like you immediately feel like you know the characters and like you've known them forever, kind of thing.
Oh yeah, just the premise of a horror story set and something like IKEA is a great premise.
Yeah, like the SCP. I don't know if you read that SCP with the IKEA.
I have not.
That's a really good one as well. There's a really good SCP story about a never-ending IKEA.
That sounds like good. Where is that on? That's not on. That's not on Nosleep. That's on.
No, it's on SCP Archives or SCP Wiki.
Oh yeah, that's another community too. That's really got a lot of readership and a lot of steam. I think. Yeah. Thinking about those kinds of communities for Shadowbox, how we can try to do some of what they're doing would be amazing. But they've also got like all these places, Creepypasta, Nosleep, all these communities, and SEC. They've got like a niche that they're occupying as well. So,
yeah, and it's like a whole universe with its own lore and yeah. I've written a few for Dr. Nosleep when I was doing a lot more commissions and stuff, and I think I wrote 4 or 5 SCP stories for him that were kind of inspired by ones from the SCP archives. And yeah, there's a lot of humor in there too. Like a lot of it's very silly kind of stuff, and then there's also more serious, scary ones.
I've got to read those. I said SEC and I meant SCP, but that's a completely different thing. The SEC. that's for investing and everything. But yeah, I've got to read those. I didn't realize you had written some SCP stories.
Yeah. The Dr. Nosleep's got another channel, the SCP Experience, where he actually gets some of them animated as well. So
very cool.
I think he had one of my SCP ones animated, but the rest were just like on his podcast.
That is, I love it. The animations that go with the narrations. Those are we've actually been talking about that with Shadowbox, is how to also get some animations to go with the narrations.
Yeah, I actually paid to have one of my stories for my YouTube channel animated. It was a short, scary story. It was like 500 words, and paid a fair bit of money to have it animate, like for a very short animation. There's probably ways to get it done cheaper, but yeah, Dr. Nosleep does a lot of those animations of commissioned horror stories, and one of the ones he had animated is like one of my favorite stories I've ever written. It was from the perspective of a discount spiritual medium who sees dead people. So he actually sees dead people, but they never tell him anything. Like the readings that he gives from what they're saying, he ends up completely lying and making stuff up because nobody actually wants to hear what dead people have to say because they're always so depressing. Yeah. So just like making up whatever. But yeah, it was pretty cool seeing that animated on his channel.
I don't think I've read that one of yours yet, but I now that I know it's animated, I need to check out the animation.
Yeah, it's a really good animation. I was very impressed by it. But that'd be really cool actually to see some stuff on Shadowbox Archives get animated. I have to see if we can find a good animator to do that for a reasonable price, maybe.
The artist who designed Biscuit Starberry, big shout out to Biscuit Starberry. She's a phenomenal writer and artist. She did our icon for Shadowbox, but she was looking into that. She was interested in animating some stories, but that is like what you're saying about having to pay people for it. There's a reason, probably because it's hard to animate stuff. It's like very time consuming. So
yeah, I don't know if I told you this. I actually went to college for animation years back.
You did not. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I graduated from computer. I had a computer animation diploma.
You're a polymath or a Renaissance person, whatever you want to call it. You got all these talents.
I was never very good at it, so.
Oh, okay. Well,
I could do the modeling. Like I could make the 3D models and do the texturing and stuff, but the actual animation itself is so time consuming, and it's like a completely different skill set than drawing. And it takes so much time. Like the people who do animation, yeah, I can't even explain to somebody how much time it takes. Like 30, you have 30 frames per second. So you do a minute long animation times 60 by 30. That's how many individual drawings you have to do for that animation. And so whether you're doing that in a software and manipulating a model or whatever, or a 2D image, you still have to make 30 iterations of that for each second of animation. Like there's no shortcuts with animation. You can't just, I don't know, maybe there is now, maybe it's gotten better, but if you just hit a button and say, oh, blend from here to here, the result is terrible. Like you literally have to do everything frame by frame by frame. And so it's very, very time consuming, and they earn every penny, those people.
Yeah, and I hear they don't make a whole lot either a lot of times. The actual animators. For the projects, other people involved in those projects might make a lot, like if it's an animated film, but the animators, I hear, they don't make as much as you think they would make.
Yeah, it's a lot of long hours, and it's a labor of love, I think, for a lot of people who work at video game companies and things like that. They're like, from what I've heard, they're there all night a lot of the time, especially if a project is coming due soon. Like they're pulling all-nighters for weeks on end trying to get it done.
I understand that. It does seem like a good way in a larger scale to get around budget constraints. So animating things, like going back to film, it's a way you can get around pitching something that is, maybe it would be too high concept or high budget, but if you animate it, anything's possible.
Yeah, it definitely opens you up for, you don't need to get a fancy special effects studio to do your special effects and stuff if you're getting somebody to animate it anyway, so they're they're going to do what you got to do.
Exactly.
I know we've gone way over time here. I wanted to.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. I was trying to make sure you got enough
I
decent
feel bad.
content.
I'm sure you're a busy guy. Real quick, is there anything you want to plug or promote? I don't know how many views these are going to get, but hopefully we can send some people to Shadowbox Archives. Anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, Shadowbox Archives. And if you could go to, when you navigate over to Shadowbox Archives, which is on Patreon, check out the feature contributors. Go to the About page, scroll down to where the feature contributors are, and check them out, because Shadowbox Archives, the community we're building, it's all of these amazing content creators, all these amazing writers and artists, and I'm pretty sure you'll be blown away by what you see when you check out their work.
Yeah, tons of well-known horror authors. Like if you're somebody who frequents Nosleep, you'll recognize
Yeah,
a lot of the people as big names from over there. Ren Wrights, Blair Daniels, that really short chick, Jesse Pullins, who's a Hawaiian shirt on Reddit, yourself, Victor Sweetser, Rick the Intern on Reddit, Beardify, tons of great authors. I'm leaving out a ton of people, but
Jordan Group, don't leave him out.
So yeah, a lot of really good authors, a lot of people who have their own books.
Jan Franz, another big name from Reddit.
Yeah.
Santiago Del Mar just recently joined us also from Reddit. A lot of legends, very viral authors.
Alan Wilson, Postmortem 33. Yep. So yeah, tons of great writers on there, and yeah, I definitely would highly recommend checking out Shadowbox Archives if you like horror, and then check out the About section and see who all these authors are, because a lot of them have books out and other projects as well.
Mm-hmm. John Beardify's there, C.M. Robinson. I'm trying not to leave anybody out, because everyone there is so amazing. I'm just happy to be in that company and a part of that project, whatever happens with it, come what may, and we'll keep churning out the content. We'll keep posting stories. So if you're into creepypasta, or if you're into other stories, come by and check it out. We've also got some artists over there as well.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, I hugely appreciate you taking time to chat with me today. And I'm looking forward to working with you more on Shadowbox Archives and seeing what the future holds with that.
Thank you, Jordan. Thanks for having me.
All right. It's been a pleasure. Talk to you later.
See ya.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed my chat with Victor. I'll include a link in the description to his current projects, including Shadowbox Archives, which I'm super excited to be a part of. Thanks everybody for listening. I really do appreciate it. And I hope you'll join me again next time for some more talks with my favorite authors and some good friends. All right. Have a good night.